The reason why New Orleans has been the setting for so many controversies involving interracial intimacy and disputes involving color differentiation within the African American community is because New Orleans has such a history of racial intermixture, more so than many other places in the country.
Some historians say a new race of people were born when the Europeans and the Africans produced an offspring. That offspring, of course, was then colonialized and bounded in a community. And so those of us who were darker could not enter sometimes.
Clearly, for many, many years, African Americans in particular, who were the products of interracial marriages, enjoyed some benefits, if for no other reason, but because their offspring were the offspring of some of those slave masters who had taken those women in most cases. I doubt seriously there were many cases of African American men mating with Caucasian women at that point, where children were even allowed to survive the gestation period, for lack of a more pleasant way to put that.
There are those of us historically who felt that, that the definition given of, quote, Creoles and their role, which is really a role of a brokerage, because the elite never talk to the peasants directly. They always have an intermediary. And so here it was, they were seeking someone who in fact were their distant cousins, who would serve the purpose of bridging the gap. And to that extent, if you internalize that, then you too began to believe, if you're black, you too began to believe that this is the only way that you're going to get any advantages.
I guess there was a certain strain amongst folks who did look like me as saying, well, those light-skinned Negroes really don't want to be with us, so why would we want to be with them?
And that's the historical precedent for some of that resentment that goes the other way. It is natural that darker-skinned black people would feel the resentments that some of them feel towards lighter-skinned black people 100 years ago or 150 years ago. It was the result of the fact that legally, lighter-skinned people tended to be the free people of color here in the Louisiana situation, if you will. Remember, there were three distinct classes. You had the white class, you had the black slave class, but then you had les gens de couleur. These were free people of color, some of whom had come from Haiti. In addition to the slave classes of Haiti, remember that when the Haitian Revolution took place and Toussaint Louverture threw out the white ruling class, he also threw out some of the people of color who represented mixtures, again, racial mixtures, lighter-skinned blacks who had been allowed even in Haiti to have positions of privilege over their black slave brethren. The same thing carries over culturally and attitudinally here.
There are institutions, schools, social clubs, churches, all existed for the free people of color, or the Creoles, and separate and distinct from those of us who were not free and not Creole.
You know, what comes from racism is a concept called internalized racial oppression. When you've been oppressed for so many years, you begin to internalize these negative things toward each other. One of the manifestations of internalized oppression that comes from racism is a concept called colorism. And colorism goes with that whole light, dark, hair, all that kind of mentality goes on right now. So the concept is called color.